A couple of days ago, when Obama spoke at the UNGA, he grappled with the issues of global terror, the growing threat from the ISIS, and the realization that America finds itself increasingly alone in the fight against the forces of evil. So in a way, this is a moment of America's strategic weakness in the fight against terror. And hence, it is also a moment of opportunity for India to extract whatever it can as a concession to cooperating in the global fight against terror. But will Narendra Modi talk Turkey? Will he talk straight with the Americans? Will he manage to strike a deal with the Americans which works well from India's point of view? For these and other issues, Arnab and Maruf talked to Hussain Haqqani, former Pakistan ambassador to the US, and Dr. Nasir Al-Omari, writer and columnist.
Hello and welcome. We are bringing you this broadcast with the backdrop of Manhattan behind me, and it's a cold and windy morning in New York. They say the weather is completely unpredictable in New York. You can't say when it's going to rain. It competes with London sometimes in terms of when it rains and when it doesn't. We're clearly unprepared for it, but it's wonderful out here. Generally, there is a lot of excitement about the speeches that will be made at the UN General Assembly, and of course, there's a sense of growing anticipation at the bilaterals which Prime Minister Narendra Modi will have, both with business leaders and others in New York, and then of course with President Barack Obama at the White House later over the weekend. But if you followed the first inaugural speech of Barack Obama at the UN General Assembly, the subject of conversation here in New York has shifted to the global concern on a kind of terrorism that has outgrown what even those who presented the most nightmarish pictures would have expected. ISIS is the center point of conversation, and to talk more about what Obama said, the global challenges, where the subcontinent figures in all of this, and what we in India should be looking out for, we have with us, of course, my dear friend and our strategic affairs expert. I always introduce Maruf now as India's most trusted strategic affairs voice. Maruf, wonderful, and thank you for flying down to New York to be part of this coverage. I look forward to learning from you and to covering this event together with you. And with us today is Hussain Haqqani. He is the Director South Asia at the Hudson Institute and a very seasoned diplomat. He's been previously Pakistan's ambassador to the United States, has been controversial, has stood up for his own issues and even taken on his own country's president in the past. Thank you very much, Hussain Haqqani Saab, for coming in today. And I'm delighted today that Dr. Nasir Al-Omari, who's a very well-known writer and political commentator, and now increasingly being regarded as one of the best independent voices on issues concerning terrorism and strategies of counterterrorism, especially in the Middle East. And he is considered now one of the most followed experts on the issue of ISIS, is also with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Al-Omari.
Appreciate it.
I therefore would like to start by asking you, I saw and followed Barack Obama's speech at the UNGA.
Yeah.
And though I'm not an expert like you, I got a sense of helplessness. I got the sense of an American president who has realized that America's game itself has overextended itself. And many years after 9/11, today America really doesn't know how to grapple with the situation. Do you think America is in control? And here at the UNGA, how do you think the rest of the world will look upon the issue of ISIS?
Well, the United States is not in control of what's happening in the world of terrorism. President Barack Obama tried hard to stay out of the Middle East.
Yeah.
But the expansion and the danger of ISIL or ISIS has forced him to interfere. Let's remember that what we're talking about here is one of the richest oil reserves in the world. So with ISIS on the border of Saudi Arabia, you're talking about a very, very dangerous situation. And they made the threats to Saudi Arabia. They made threats to the Gulf countries.
Yes.
And we have seen how armies disappear in the face of ISIS, like the Iraqi army, which was supposed to be trained for many, many years, and it just disintegrated in the advance, in the face of ISIS. So President Obama had no choice, I think, but to act at a very, very level of discomfort with getting involved and becoming a war president.
Well, but has this intervention come too late, Maruf? Because America saw it coming. America knew the signs. But that's the problem I feel with American diplomacy is it does not look below its immediate narrow spectrum interests. America could have acted on ISIS, but it felt that with its own withdrawal from Iraq, it need not get involved. Well, and they could have done much more earlier.
Well, as the Economist said some months ago, that taking action, military action, is per se not going to solve the problem. But not taking action is even worse.
That's right.
So there's one.
That's what they did in this.
Yeah. But I think more importantly, we need to understand 3 or 4 things. One is that the ISIS has emerged primarily because a lot of support was provided to it by several Arab countries.
That's right.
And it is difficult and embarrassing for America now to get them, to arm twist them to become part of a coalition against an entity that they helped strengthen, if not create. The second aspect that you brought out about armies withered away in front of the ISIS, it also happened because of the internal politics of Iraq. Prime Minister Maliki systematically purged the Iraqi army of leaders and commanders.
What did America do then?
So America,
when that purge was happening, and as you say, when the Shiite leader of Iraq was, as some say, being extremely biased vis-a-vis the Sunni community. What did America do then?
That's a very good question, because that's what I'm getting to.
Yeah.
That you cannot, having been embroiled in a conflict for 10 years or so,
right,
completely dissociate yourself overnight from it. And that's what's going to happen even in Afghanistan. That it's not like an open and shut case, that you walk out and it's all behind you, and let's look at it afresh.
Yeah.
Because the hangover of such conflicts in the region and its implications for Asian stability, and I'm talking of Asian stability because it matters to all of us here, and that is America's withdrawal obsession has implications for stabilities in all our countries.
So Maruf, I'm glad you made that point, because I share that view that, as somebody said, America is fantastic at conflict management. It is very bad at conflict resolution. And they have not been able to resolve either Iraq, where there's a big mess, and Maruf now talks about Afghanistan. What then is the way out right now? We see a confused America.
We must understand that the Americans feel that they are very comfortable in the sense that they are protected by 2 oceans. There's a long history of isolationism. President Bush was one extreme. President Obama became the other extreme. He wanted to be the not Bush.
Yeah.
So he wanted to disengage from Iraq and Afghanistan. But the fact of the matter is that the world is more complex.
Absolutely.
Tend to reduce it to a simple paradigm of who can we bomb, who can we take out to lunch.
Yeah.
And so the American foreign policy became kind of disengaged these last several years. As far as the rise of ISIS is concerned, it was also made possible by the fact that when the other Arab countries who are America's allies, they wanted America to get involved in taking out Bashar Assad. Mm-hmm. If America had provided air support in the beginning in Syria, then maybe there could have been a possibility of the Free Syrian Army or somebody like that coming to power in Syria and therefore having a base from which to oppose. Similarly, they totally dropped the ball on Iraq. Now, what does it mean for the rest of the world? ISIS is believed to have several thousand fighters who have been recruited from places as far as Australia. It's an ideological recruitment process. Mm-hmm. I edit a journal called The Current Trends in Islamist Ideology. We monitor the trends.
Yeah.
We in fact had articles about this trend a few months before the whole world media started paying attention to it. Now, belatedly, Obama has been able to create a coalition and he's bombing ISIS. The problem may not be solved. What does it mean for the rest of us? First, Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan is already talking about creating a Al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent, as they call it. Now, why are they doing that? They are in competition with ISIS for recruitment of all psychopathic young people who are ideologically predisposed to hating cultures, other societies. And Al-Qaeda will have a revival as soon as America withdraws. The Taliban will definitely have a revival. And so, those of us who are in the subcontinent, we cannot ignore the Al-Qaeda factor simultaneous to the ISIS. from the American point of view, that's very,
But you
very
mentioned-
complicated because Americans are not used to multiple.
But you
regional
mentioned the Al Qaeda factor. Now let me share with you, sir, from an Indian perspective, how we view the Al Qaeda and why we are increasingly having this conversation about the ISIS and Al Qaeda and the global implications of terrorism here in New York. Because for us, especially in the last couple of months, these two organizations of evil, the Al Qaeda and the ISIS, have both made references to India. Now they may be rhetorical, but they do sort of board a sort of ominous shadow upon what may happen in the future. My concern is, and my question to you therefore is, as far as Al Qaeda is concerned, sir, we in India believe the Al Qaeda is basically now being protected by the ISI. Their bases are very much there in Quetta. You cannot dissociate yourself from the fact that Mullah Omar al-Zawahiri are believed to have Pakistani patronage. If this global war on terror, which Obama speaks about in the UNGA, really takes off, can we, sir, expect America to get tough with Pakistan's support to those organizations, especially the ISI and the others, who support the Al Qaeda and its affiliates on its own soil? Do you think that might happen?
I think there's a
Again,
realization.
I'm bringing a very narrow Indian prism to it, but I'd like your
I
views.
understand, but it's pretty much the same dynamic. We have great powers using these militants. They used them in Afghanistan. They used them in Syria recently to fight Assad,
Yes.
and then they got out of control, and now they're fighting the Gulf.
Yeah.
The very people who sent them there are now threatened by them. We have seen these militants being used very, very carefully in an orchestrated way to fight specific wars for the U.S. and for its allies, like Saudi Arabia, for example. Supported ISIS, and now they are a target of ISIS. So I'm afraid we have a dynamic that is going on worldwide.
The reason I'm asking this is because Pakistan has been pretty brazen about it. I mean, we've known that Pakistani leaders in the past, in conversations there's been this recorded conversation between Durrani and Condoleezza Rice at the height of the tension between Pakistan and America after the 26/11 attack, when Condoleezza Rice confronted Durrani, and he admitted that we do use these groups. We do use these terrorist groups, and we have a license to do so to defend our own strategic interests. Maruf, today America is talking of a global war on terror. How sincere is it? What does it mean for us? Should we give them blind support anymore when it is clearly established that war on terror does not at all take into account genuine Indian concerns? They've been blind to our concerns.
I think it's a very important point. I was going to come to that. I think what we need to understand that what is America's track record been? America's track record has been that at the end of the day, they get energized into fighting terror or going into a war on terror when Americans or American interests are directly threatened.
Absolutely.
And they go out only to defend American interests. Now that is something, as a human being, also as a leader in your class, you are only respected as a leader in your class when you go beyond personal parochial interests.
Yes.
America has not been able to do that. Now is the time, if Obama is serious about what he is saying at the UN and has just said at the UN, then he has to demonstrate that. Now I want to bring in two other aspects, and one is that though it is being said Obama's presidency is on its last 2 years, and Obama therefore is weakened, he may be domestically, politically weakened to try and orchestrate the next presidential nominee of his choice, but it gives him much more room to do foreign affairs the way a president of the United States should
but
be
I'm
doing.
looking
The
at
problem is the idea. The problem
And the
is
second thing, which I just want to complete.
But
this
why
point.
should we play ball with Obama?
No,
You see,
no, that's the point I'm making.
America will leave Afghanistan by 2016.
No, that's the point I'm making. The point I'm making, that if America is serious about its strategic partnership with India, and I'm bringing it down to a further narrow parochial interest, then it has to deliver on issues that Arnab is talking about, which is that you do not fight terror in isolation and in pockets. Terror is a phenomena which has a connect, though ISIS and Al-Qaeda may not necessarily have a connect, because ISIS is a state as large as Belgium. It is earning money, a couple of $1 million every day by sale of oil. It has more recruits coming there because there's better pay, there are better victories to go to.
So why
it's
should
not
my
a
question
foggy idea.
for an Indian audience out there, Dr. Alumari, we are saying that, we are tired of the homilies. Every year there is a bilateral between India and America, and the one thing which is said again, the world's oldest democracy and the world's largest democracy must come together to fight the scourge of terrorism. But what have we got at the end of it?
I think
Besides more insecurity and more terror attacks.
I think, unfortunately, the United States, among all the world powers, including India and all regional powers, the United States can deploy forces, and it has governments that can energize to take care of terrorism, like Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Qatar. They put all these countries together. What other country can bring all these people together to fight something like ISIS? So I think the United States, in the fight against terrorism, as much as we disagree with the way it deals with certain issues, I think it's indispensable, and it's a true enemy of ISIS.
Why should India?
One rebuttal, that you do not fight terrorism with Tomahawk missiles. You've got to put feet on the ground. You've got to put boots on the ground.
Yeah.
You've got to show a physical commitment to fighting terrorism, which America is
I doubt America has that
Which is
today.
America is reluctant to do.
Americans are reluctant to.
I doubt America has it today. So I look.
Maruf,
Yes.
India will not put boots on the ground in Afghanistan or Iraq or Syria either. Let's be realistic here.
Well,
What I'm saying is, this has to be understood. India is a victim of terrorism directly. It needs to fight terrorism. It has a particular view of where the terrorism is emanating from, which, by the way, now the Americans share much more than they did, say, 10, 15, 20 years ago. That is an accepted reality. Especially after the discovery of Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad, the American perspective has changed considerably. It's not an either or, that why should we play ball with you can play ball with America on certain terms and on certain conditions, which take
So for example, let me give you one issue.
for example, Lashkar-e-Taiba.
No, for example,
5 years ago, Lashkar-e-Taiba was not a major American target.
My greatest concern from an Indian perspective is the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the fact that Hafiz Saeed continues his free run, and he poses a great and imminent danger to India. And in July, once again, the verdict, the court proceedings in the 26/11 trial remained frozen. We see a lack of commitment, and America is really not pushing. Despite Obama coming and saying on the floor of the Indian Parliament that we will push Pakistan to act on 26/11. So we, in a way, Mr. Haqqani, feel cheated by America on the issue of taking on concerns of terrorism emanating from Pakistani soil against Indian interests. Our second concern, longer term, and I would like your perspective on it, is regarding Afghanistan. Because once the Americans move out, then there's going to be this vacuum. And you already find now the Pakistanis are moving their forces into Waziristan in the last few months. What is going to happen then, once the Americans withdraw? You have a contentious civilian leadership. You have the Afghan Taliban, the Pakistani Taliban, the ISI, the Haqqani brothers, all playing in that field, which is a very dangerous strategic cocktail for India. We are concerned about it. So, in your view, since I consider you one of the more balanced observers of the South Asian region, how should India play? The world needs our help now. We are a large and emerging power. How should we play? And if we are to play ball, what are the terms we should be playing?
You should put your concerns center stage. When Prime Minister Modi sees President Obama, he should make it very clear to him that these are certain things which we need for India's security, which is also global security is now one. It has been proven that you can't parse it. Pakistan is now becoming a victim of terrorism itself because these people rebound. Dr. Alumari pointed out that some of these groups were trained at one time or another for certain wars, but then they have an ideology, they have a belief system. So they then come back and fight at home as well. So eventually, the American softness about that whole region will melt away against Indian fortitude. And that is my optimistic but also realistic analysis. I'll tell you why.
So we should really talk Turkey, as they say with the Americans.
This is now the time you should talk straight.
And Manmohan Singh probably didn't for the last 3 or 4 years.
Manmohan Singh Sahib, with all due respect to him, didn't usually talk much. So talking Turkey was a little more difficult when you did.
It's one of those issues I completely agree with you on.
But and also I think, as far as the Americans are concerned, they always respond in a quid pro quo fashion. So the fact of the matter is that you want them to deliver, then America is going to go back to asking the same list of wish lists that they have. Then what are you going to deliver on our wish list, which is, the nuclear deal, which is arms purchases from India, which is more business partnership, opening up the red tape in India.
Very frankly, I see no reason why India should not open itself up to some of those things.
Precisely.
Very frankly, the strategic partnership is more important for you as well as for the rest of the world right now. Yeah. So some of these little, what I call the Babu obsessions, we will not sign this agreement, we will not do it this way, we will do that. Those should need to be set aside, because let us be honest, this is a millennial conflict. These people, the extremist jihadis, they have a worldview. They want to slaughter people who do not think like them, irrespective of whether they have Muslim names like the three of us or whether they don't have a Muslim name like you. They have a worldview, and they are not going to stop at one area. They talk about global caliphate, and they talk about all kinds of arenas and theaters of war.
And the elephant in the room is that and this is what I keep talking about and raising in my discussions about this, is that the Muslim world has to come to a realization that these terrorists, while they provide a wonderful venue to vent about political grievances, actually wind up harming the very societies and the very countries that they claim that they are fighting for. So this is the elephant in the room. We like to blame, like some, in the Muslim world.
Why are the references being made about India? My question to you is, we saw 2 references. I saw a certain sort of market competitiveness between the ISIS and the Al-Qaeda in references to India. My own view is that Al-Zawahiri is a tired old man who's worried about his own redundancy with the ISIS, and hence to retain his relevance and those who control him, his masters, which is the ISI, for them to retain the relevance, he needs to make a television appearance once in a while. That's the cynical view, but that's also my view. What is your own view on why the ISIS and the Al-Qaeda made these comments regarding India? Are they serious? Do they pose a threat? And how should India and the Indian government look for it?
I don't think they pose a threat to India, but they do what they like to mess up any political situation, so that India can probably have issues with Pakistan. They survive.
You think so?
Well, they try. That's
a very compassionate view on Pakistan. I don't have a compassionate view on Pakistan.
What I'm saying is, they use this in Syria. They said, okay, we're fighting the Shia leader, so come everybody, let's fight him. When in fact, what they want is more Sunnis to come and make it messy, so that their ideology can attract more people. So when they attack India, they are trying to cater to certain audiences who may have a problem with India. So this is they don't have an army to conquer countries, but they do have the ability to create a lot of trouble between countries.
But that's one part of it. The other part of it is that obviously there are jihadi groups, those who have already been trained, they already know how to fight. It's a good idea to try and attract recruits from them. So for example, Al-Qaeda attracted recruits from the Mujahideen that fought against the Soviets. Now ISIS is trying to attract recruits from Lashkar-e-Taiba and from other groups. And so therefore when they start talking about India, people who have been brainwashed into thinking about Ghazwa-e-Hind, I don't know if you're familiar with that term. So Ghazwa-e-Hind, those people will say, we can now fight in another arena and thereby get better trained.
So we were talking a while earlier, and you said, sorry, Maruf, we wanted
also, India has one of the largest Muslim populations in the world, and very few relative numbers of people who have got involved in ideological warfare. So therefore, it is seen as potentially a good recruitment ground.
A more pluralist society.
And therefore, it seems that's one. And the second thing is that there is, and the Pakistani press is on record with some of their writings, that some elements in Pakistan were encouraging the Al-Qaeda to focus more on India so that the heat on the Pakistan army would come off.
That's right.
From battling the problems in the frontier and the Waziristan and elsewhere, which was a heady mix between the Al-Qaeda's philosophy and the Taliban's philosophy. So to move away and try and focus their conflict there so that the Pakistan army would get some relief.
No, I think in summary I'd say that my own view is that this is a wonderful opportunity. I believe we are at a moment of inflection as far as India is concerned. I'm sorry, gentlemen, I always bring in an Indian perspective. This broadcast is primarily for an Indian audience. It's a wonderful opportunity. You have a new government in India. I believe, for all that people are saying, that the White House is looking very closely at the Modi government and looking to working more closely and actively with the Modi government. I think what I take away from the conversation is Mr. Modi should talk Turkey, talk business, and extract as much as he can out of America in terms of a commitment to together fight not just global terrorism, but terrorism that emanates from Pakistan. Let's see if Mr. Modi does that. He does the tough talk with Pakistan when required. Perhaps he will do it when he meets Obama on the 30th. I thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing
Pleasure.
this morning with me. Thank you, Makari. Thank you, Madhu. Thank you very much.